back with the creation and colonialism of Israel over the Palestinian people. Um, this is mostly the responsibility of Britain, the Ottoman Empire, and anyone who funds currently Israel now, like the U.S. and other nations that have no problem with what's happening to the Palestinian people. But there's a lot to go over, and I would have to say, as I'm going over this mandate for Palestine, um, it's consider this a hand-me-down type of genocide. Okay, so the mandate for Palestine was a League of Nations mandate for British administration of the territories of Palestine and Transjordan, both of which has been conceded by the Ottoman Empire following the end of the World War I in 1918. The mandate was assigned to Britain by San Remo Conference in April 1920 after France's concession in the 1918 Clemenceau Floyd-George Agreement of the previously agreed International Administration of Palestine under the Sykes-Picot Agreement. So this is also going to have to do with one state or a two-state solution. Now, I would have to say that it's probably not popular amongst this infighting to even have a two-state solution, okay? The people that made Israel and supplanted it into the Palestinian land and so that Jews could have a holy land while secretly Christian Zionists are like rubbing their hands together. Yeah, this is basically how that is. Transjordan was added to the mandate after the Arab kingdom to Damascus was toppled by the French in the Franco-Syrian War. Civil administration began in Palestine and Transjordan in July 1920 and April 1921, respectively, and the mandate was enforced from 29 September to 1923 to 15 May 1948 and to the 25th of May 1946, respectively. The mandate document was based on Article 22 of the Covenant of the League of Nations, 28 of June of 1919, and the Supreme Council of the Principal Allied Powers, San Remo Resolution of the 25th April 1920. The objective of the mandates over formal territories of Ottoman Empire was to provide administration advice and assistance by the mandatory until such time as they are able to stand alone, end quote. The border between Palestine and Transjordan was agreed in the final mandate document, and the approximate northern border with the French mandate for Syria and Lebanon was agreed in the Palit-Newcomb Agreement of 29 December 1920. So all these treaties pretty much don't matter anymore. Like, I know it's not saying treaty, it's saying agreement. You know, this is like documents people sign, like signing a waiver to the land. You know, this is also gonna make it sound like it cares about the issues of the Palestinian people. Um, Anyways, in Palestine, the mandate required Britain to put into effect the Balfour Declaration's national home for the Jewish people alongside the Palestinian Arabs who composed the vast majority of local population. This requirement and others, however, would not apply to the separate Arab emirate to be established in Transjordan. The British controlled Palestine for almost 3 decades, overseeing a succession of protest riots and revolts between Jewish and Palestinian Arab communities. Yes, because you just put it blanketly over it and expect everybody to get along. You know, colonialist nations will be like, well, we settled your differences by conquering you, so now you can live in peace. That's probably the type of logic this is having. Okay. During the mandate, the area saw the rise of two nationalist movements, the Jews and the Palestinian Arabs. Intercommunal conflict in mandatory Palestine ultimately produced the 1936-1939 Arab Revolt in Palestine and the 1944-1948 Jewish insurgency in mandatory Palestine. The United Nations Partition Plan for Palestine was passed on the 29th November 1947. This envisaged the creation of separate Jewish and Arab states operating under economic union, and with Jerusalem transferred to UN trusteeship 2 weeks later, Colonial Secretary Arthur Creech Jones announced that the British Mandate would end on the 15th of May 1948. On the last days of the Mandate, the Jewish community there issued the Israel Declaration of Independence. After the failure of the United Nations Partition Plan for Palestine, the 1947-1949 Palestine War ended with mandatory Palestine divided among Israel, the Jordan excavation of the West Bank, and the Egyptian Ali Palestine Protectorate in the Gaza Strip. Okay, the Egyptian Brotherhood is probably where this comes in, um, as acting as a second branch of the Egyptian Brotherhood, and the government of Gaza. Sorry about that. I'm still trying to do my own, even though I'm like reading all this to you guys. There's still stuff that I feel like I should know on my own when explaining this stuff. Okay. Transjordan was added to the mandate following the Cairo Conference of March 1921, at which it was agreed that Abdullah bin Hassan would administer the territory under the auspice of Palestinian Mandate. Since the end of the world of the war, sorry about that. Since the end of the war had been administered from Damascus by the joint Arab-British military administration headed by Abdullah's youngest brother Faisal, and then became a no man's land after the French defeated Faisal's army in 1920, and the British initially chose to avoid definite connection with Palestine. Okay. Well, I mean, it's out of your hands now. You just look good. But I can see how legally, lawfully, intentionally, this is no longer a British project at this point anymore. Okay. The addition of Transjordan was given legal form on the 21 May, March 21st, when the British incorporated Article 25 into the Palestinian Mandate. Article 25 was implemented via the 16 September 1922 Transjordan Memorandum, which established a separate administration of Transjordan for the application of the mandate under the general supervision of Great Britain. In April 1923, 5 months after the mandate came into force, Britain announced its intention to recognize an independent government in Transjordan. This autonomy increased further under a 20th February 1928 treaty, and the state fully became independent with a Treaty of London of the 22nd of March 1946. Okay. All right, background. Commitment regarding the Jewish people, the Balfour Declaration. Okay, so this might actually help me in my understanding of all these treaties, because I've been listening to this in the background before I really made any comments. I made some really poor comments on Twitter. Like I had somebody like my video or something I said once, and then I said another thing that probably seemed problematic, and I'm going to go into that actually in the next videos after I'm done posting about the main data and history, because I got some critiques of what I said, some things I still agree with. All right. Thank you for still listening if you are. Immediately following the declaration of the war on the Ottoman Empire in November 1914, the British War Cabinet began to consider the future of Palestine. At the time, the Ottoman region with a small minority of Jewish people. By late 1917, in the lead up to the Balfour Declaration, the wider war had reached a stalemate. Two of Britain's allies were not fully engaged. The United States had not yet to suffer a casualty, and the Russians were in the midst of October Resolution. A stalemate in southern Palestine was broken by the Battle of Beersheba on 31st October 1917. The release of the Balfour Declaration was authorized by the 31st October. The preceding cabinet discussion had mentioned perceived propaganda benefits among the worldwide Jewish community for the Allied war effort. The British government issued the declaration. The public statement announced support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine on the 2nd of November 1917. The opening words of the declaration represented the first public expression of support for Zionism by the major political power. The term national home had no precedent in international law and was internationally vague about whether a Jewish state was contemplated. The intended boundaries of Palestine were not specified, and the British government later confirmed that the words in Palestine meant that the Jewish nation home was not intended to cover all of Palestine. Again, it was just like a vague colonial project. They don't really know how this lower caste citizens of Jews and Palestinians, even though that this is mostly for the Jews in the end, it's still there's this confusion on how to maintain everybody comfortably. And I get it. Like even outside of making this an ethno state for Jewish people against the Palestinians, it still makes sense that there was a little confusion on how this would all play out. Because not every Jewish person and Palestinian people are all going to be at each other's throats. Like some of these people probably were like, "Hey, what's going on? Why are we being colonized? Why can't we work something out?" Um, but the work something out when it comes from the hierarchy is like not really the same when you hear it uh, from the lower types. Um, all right. The second half of the declaration was added to satisfy opponents of the policy who said it would otherwise prejudice the positions of the local Palestinian opponents. Oh, sorry, local population of the Palestinian and encourage anti-Semitism worldwide by, according to the president of the Conjoint Committee, David L. Alexander and Claude Montefiore, in the letter to the Times, quote, stamping the Jews as strangers in their native lands, end quote. The declaration called for safeguarding the civil and religious fights for the Palestinian Arabs, who compose the vast majority of local population and the rights of Jewish communities in any other country. All right. The Balfour Declaration was subsequently incorporated into the mandate for Palestine to put the declaration into effect. Unlike the declaration itself, the mandate was legally binding on the British government. Okay, so the British government still has control over this. That's what I figured. It's just an eventuality of the situation that it just phases into a project, a hand-me-down project that is no longer in British hands. But um, I still kind of think it's vaguely their responsibility, even though there's a whole different generation of people there than who first raised the hand-me-down nation. Okay. Commitment regarding the Arab population. The McMahon Hussein correspondence. Between July 1915 and March 1916, a series of 10 letters were exchanged between Sharif Hussein bin Ali, the head of the Hashemite family that had ruled the Hijaz as vassals for almost a millennium, and the Lieutenant Colonel Sir Henry McMahon, British High Commander to Egypt. In the letters, particularly that of 24th October 1915, the British government agreed to recognize Arab independence after the war in exchange for the Sheriff of Mecca launched the Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire. While there was some similar value in the Arab manpower and local knowledge alongside the British Army, the primary reason for the arrangement was to counteract the Ottoman declaration of jihad, holy war, against the Allies and to maintain the support of the 70 million Muslims in British India, particularly those in the Indian Army that had been deployed in all major theaters of the wider war. The area of Arab independence was defined as, quote, in the limits and boundaries posed by the Sheriff of Mecca, with the expulsion of the coastal area lying to the west of, quote, the districts of Damascus, Homs, Hama, and Alopo, end quote. Conflicting interpretations of this description caused great controversy in subsequent years. A particular dispute, which continues to the present, was whether Palestine was part of the coastal exclusion. At the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, British Prime Minister David Lloyd George told his French counterpart, Georges Clemenceau, and the other allies that the McMahon-Hussein correspondence was a treaty obligation. Alright, I'll be back in the next one, guys. Sorry to make that short.